In medieval Europe, tipping was not about supplementing wages, but rather an expression of gratitude. Wealthy lords and ladies would often travel with entourages, requiring lodging and services at various estates and inns. Upon departing, it was customary for guests to offer a small sum of money to the servants who had attended to their needs. This practice, known as avails, was seen as a gesture of appreciation for the servants' hard work and hospitality. The term tip itself is believed to have originated from the acronym "to ensure promptness," which emerged in 18th century England. This suggests a shift in the perception of tipping from a spontaneous act of generosity to a more calculated means of ensuring good service. As tipping became more commonplace, it gradually evolved from a voluntary gift to an expected practice, particularly among the upper classes. However, the concept of tipping was not without its critics even in its early days. Some viewed it as a form of bribery, arguing that it created an unfair system where those who could afford to tip received preferential treatment. Others saw it as demeaning to both the giver and the receiver, undermining the notion of genuine hospitality and service. Despite these criticisms, tipping persisted and eventually spread beyond the confines of aristocratic circles, becoming ingrained in the social fabric of Europe. As transatlantic travel increased in the 18th and 19th centuries, European customs, including tipping, made their way across the ocean to the newly established United States. Tipping arrived on American shores with European immigrants. Affluent Americans, eager to emulate European customs, adopted tipping. Initially, it was confined to the upper classes. However, the general public was less receptive. Tipping clashed with American ideals of egalitarianism and self-reliance. Many saw it as undignified for both the tipper and the tippee. The anti-tipping movement argued it fostered civility and unfair wages. They called for fair wages instead of tips. Some businesses even banned tipping. Despite resistance, tipping persisted and spread. By the early 20th century, it was common in restaurants and hotels. The early 20th century witnessed a surge in the anti-tipping movement, fueled by a growing sense of national identity and a desire to distance American customs from their European counterparts. The anti-tipping crusade found allies among diverse groups, including labor unions, who saw tipping as a way for employers to exploit workers, and social reformers who viewed it as degrading and undemocratic. One of the most vocal opponents of tipping was William Scott, a Kansas City hotel owner who launched an anti-tipping crusade in 1904. Scott argued that tipping was un-American and that it created a system of petty extortion that fostered civility and undermined the dignity of labor. He called for businesses to adopt a no-tipping policy and to pay their employees living wages. Scott's campaign resonated with many Americans, and anti-tipping societies sprang up across the country. These organizations distributed pamphlets, published articles, and lobbied lawmakers to outlaw the practice. Several states even passed laws banning tipping, though these were often difficult to enforce and ultimately short-lived. Despite the fervor of the anti-tipping movement, it faced an uphill battle. The practice of tipping was deeply entrenched in certain industries, and many business owners were reluctant to raise prices to offset the cost of paying higher wages. Moreover, some workers themselves preferred tipping, as it provided them with immediate cash and allowed them to potentially earn more than a fixed wage. The post-Civil War era marked a turning point in the history of tipping in the United States. The abolition of slavery created a need for a new labor system, particularly in the service sector. Tipping emerged as a solution for employers to pay former slaves less than a living wage, shifting the burden onto customers. This practice was prevalent in the restaurant industry, which grew rapidly in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Restaurants embraced tipping to minimize labor costs and keep menu prices low. Tipping evolved into a de facto wage system, with employers paying tipped workers a fraction of the minimum wage. This system perpetuated economic inequality, particularly along racial lines. Many jobs relying on tips were predominantly occupied by African Americans who faced widespread discrimination. Tipping often perpetuated racial disparities in wages and working conditions. As the 20th century progressed, tipping became institutionalized in American society. It spread to a wide range of service-oriented businesses, shaping customer service worker relationships for generations.